California Democratic Representative John Garamendi. Really appreciate you taking the time tonight.
Good to be with you.
Representative Garamendi, let's start with the report that North Korean troops are in Russia, that they are actively training and could be on the battlefield soon. What would it mean if a North Korean soldier is killed? How does that complicate things?
Well, it would mean that that soldier should never have been there in the first place. And certainly they're going to be killed. Several or maybe many of them will be killed if they're on the battlefield. Ukraine has been very, very successful in taking on the Russian troops and inflicting very serious death as well as injuries on the Russian troops. It'll be the same for the North Koreans. There's nothing special about a North Korean soldier on the battlefield, except it does add additional personnel to Putin's army. And that leads us to believe that he's having trouble recruiting and or bringing to the battlefield Russians. So he's reaching out across the world. Perhaps just as important are the armaments, the munitions that the North Koreans have sent already. This is not new. North Korea has been involved in this for some time. The troops, they're going to be killed, no doubt about it.
Yeah. You know, you're a member of the House Armed Services Committee. I know that one of your colleagues on that committee, Representative Mike Turner, said that the U.S. should consider direct military action if North Korean troops enter the war with Ukraine. Do you agree with that?
I think Mike jumped before he thought seriously about the second effect of that happening. No, we should not be directly involved. That is American troops, American fighter jets, piloted by Americans, American artillery, handled by American soldiers. No, we should not be in Ukraine. We should be assisting Ukraine all out. And I would suggest to Mike Turner that he ought to talk about the 10.5 months that the Republicans in the Congress of the United States, Mike included, held back the necessary munitions and equipment that the Ukrainians needed. That left them short of supplies, munitions, and other equipment when Russia started its assault in the early summer. So therein lies the real issue, and that is the American government must continue to provide support to Ukraine, just as the Europeans are. Remember, the NATO countries and the European Union are all in on this. And having just listened to Donald Trump for the last hour and a half, where he basically said, we don't need alliances. Hello? We don't need alliances? Former President Trump, have you lost it completely? If NATO was not there, I could assure you that Russia would be pushing into the Baltic countries. And they could easily do that were it not for NATO. So we really need to bulk up and continue to support the Europeans, European unions, as well as NATO. And keep in mind what Trump has said just tonight, which is a repeat of what he has said over and over for the last more than a year and a half, and that is NATO ought to go. He actually said that if a NATO country didn't come up with its 2% for their military, then he would be fine with Russia invading that country. Hello? We're talking about a fundamental national security issue here. Trump in his speeches are basically indicating that he's willing to hand over Eastern Europe.
I appreciate that perspective. We're almost out of time, so I do want to make sure to talk about Israel because we do see Israel actively eliminating Middle East terror leaders. According to them, they say 3 Hezbollah leaders were taken out just today. In your eyes, what does all of this mean for chances of a ceasefire?
I think somebody said the word octopus a while ago in describing what's going on. Octopuses can regrow their arms. You're not going to be successful. Israel's tried this in the previous decades to eliminate Hamas, to eliminate Hezbollah with military action. All it led to was a further reason for the people in Gaza as well as in Lebanon to join up those 2 terrorist organizations. The trouble starts with Iran. And until Iran backs off and no longer supports these terrorist organizations, they will continue.
So, Representative, what needs to be done about the Iran problem? And we are out of time in just about 15 seconds. What needs to be done first?
We need to be supporting those people in Iran, the public, as they push back against their totalitarian dictators.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find News Nation on your screen. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.